being in New York, it was kind of a blessing in that you're exposed to a lot of culture, a lot of open thinking, a lot of the arts. So I lived in Manhattan for many years while I was going to university, which also gave me the opportunity to try to find internships and work at some of the local kind of creative agencies. So my first experience was an intern at a company called Smart Design. It's a design consulting agency in the city. That internship lasted almost 3 years. That was really, again, lucky to get that. That became a big part of my education and schooling. It was to have on-the-job training. It didn't matter if I was paid. It didn't make a difference. But I couldn't get this in a traditional engineering degree. So I was able to kind of augment that curriculum with my own through internship. So it's really, that internship is extremely valuable for many of the young college students and colleagues. I think that's something to keep in mind too in terms of how you can take
So
your
in this role or at this
experiences and
company
things like that.
in New York,
So
designed a lot
in
of
this role or at this
tools
company
and kitchen products.
in New York,
I've used my
designed
mechanical
a lot of
degree
kitchen tools
and
and kitchen
creative
products.
space to
So
create some
I
of
used my mechanical
these
engineering
products for a company
degree
called
and in the creative
It's a
space to
kitchen,
create
kind
some
of
of
home goods
these
company
products for a company
in the
called
United States,
It's a kitchen
where
and home goods
they try
company
to
in
innovate
the
and
United
use
States.
these tools. So it's not a,
Where
some heavy technology associated with any of this, but to say, how do we make a better bowl or how do we make a better spoon? There's always some way to do it, no matter how simple you think it may be.
there's always some way to do
So
it, no matter
I'd
how
say
simple
almost
you
10 years
think it may
ago,
be.
a little over 10 years ago, I moved
So
to San
I'd say
Francisco,
almost 10 years
where
ago, a little over 10 years
as a
ago,
designer
I ended up
interested
moving to San
in
Francisco
technology,
Bay Area.
this was really the place to
As
be.
a designer
It's
interested
amazing. It's
in
grown considerably
technology,
since I've
this
moved
was
there.
really the place
So I
to
ended up
be.
working
It still
primarily
is.
at
It's
another
grown
agency
considerably
called Frog
since I
Design.
moved there.
They're
So I
famous
ended
for
up working
designing the
primarily at
original
another agency
Apple
called Frog
Macintosh
Design.
computers
They're famous
with
from
Steve Jobs
designing
many,
the
many years ago.
original
That's how the company
Apple
started
Macintosh computers
in San Francisco.
with Steve.
Up a lot of different design opportunity for me and learning opportunity for me, where I was able to apply some of the skills that go into, call it, more basic products to much more advanced and technical products. So also at this time, there in the Bay Area, there was the dot-com kind of crash happened in the early 2000s, and then there was kind of this uptake again in design and technology, and really hardware coming back into the mix of things. So hardware not being thought of as a tool or something, an object, but more part of a larger system where you have digital and physical products sort of working together. And this was really important to me, and this is one of the reasons that San Francisco really made a lot of sense for me to be there, because between the digital and physical space, to create an overall experience, it really starts to blur those lines or break down the distinction between the two. So I ended up in those consulting days working on a lot of different projects. The beauty of working in a consultancy is you're asked to do many different types of things. Whether it's be on the ground in China and making something and making sure it ships, or coming up with the future concept to inspire an internal team. So you get a lot of experience in a consultancy or an agency through a large variety of projects and clients. So 5 years ago, I ended up joining with one of my clients, which was Dolby Laboratories. So we were doing some work with them at Frog, and it seemed like a very interesting company, and I ended up going to work with them to lead their product design team, which now consists of industrial design and user experience design. So many people are familiar with this brand, but no one knows what they do. They think it's something, you make a speaker, or something about sound, but they actually, so yeah, this is maybe what comes to mind, an old tape deck or something with a button that you push and it makes your audio sound better. But really what the company is about, it's an R&D company. It's a technology R&D company centered in really audio and visual programs. So coming up with what the future of sort of the senses sees and hears for the most part. So my role is not necessarily doing this work. We have a lot of brilliant scientists and engineers working in large labs in the building, coming up with these amazing things. My job there is to sort of take that work or take that technology and create these more user-facing experiences or products. So I'll show a little bit more of this later. This is a movie theater that we developed that takes a lot of that technology being built in the labs, but presenting it to the audience in a way that they understand and can appreciate. So that's just a little bit of background about myself and where I've kind of come from, or my path. So today I really want to talk about design and what I do, and it's a blend of this kind of art and science, but how, when I think about the steps we take as designers, how that can apply to actually a much broader field of innovation and even business design. So designer is a very broad term. You can be a designer of many different things. I kind of consider it this combination of this analytical, very technical type of person or this way of thinking, combined with this way of being very creative, artistic, and sort of this emotional style of thinking, and really bringing those two things together. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit more, and there's 6 points that I want to go through that I'm going to speak to in a little bit more detail. So leveraging a design process as a guideline. So there's a kind of general process that we go through in design. Maybe many of you who've worked on projects kind of can see yourself working through steps like this, where there's a design ask or a brief that's given to you. You do some research, exploration, prototyping, down selecting, and so on. So I thought back to probably one of my first projects ever. Again, this must be right out of college, and not knowing it, but these were the steps you kind of take. So it was working on nothing overly high tech or complicated here, but this was a cheese slicer. It's a wire cheese slicer used for slicing soft cheeses. So again, nothing mind-blowing here, but the ask from this company OXO was to develop a new style of cheese slicer where the wire wouldn't break, because this company has a lifetime warranty on all their products, and the nature of a thin wire on a yoke like that, it's bound to break over time, or if you misuse it, it's going to snap. So that was their ask. That was their design brief. How do we create something that doesn't break and we don't have to kind of keep returning these things, and it's a better overall cheese slicing experience? So part of that, I've never used this product a product like this before. You have to teach yourself how to become almost like an expert in that field. So there's a lot of testing, a lot of slicing cheeses, different types of cheeses, breaking cheese slicers, seeing what worked and seeing what didn't. Concepting out different ideas of what it means to create. What's a new way of thinking about a cheese slicer. Prototyping quickly, so hacking different models up, trying different things. This is just in the workshop, kind of tinkering and trying things myself. Then engineering all the little details associated with it. So this is more of like the mechanical engineering, how it's put together, how it's made. Negotiating every little millimeter to see what's going to look the best and work the best. And then eventually, coming to this final product or this final design. The solution here was to actually create, not to necessarily make a wire that is impossible to break, because that's an impossible ask, but rather to make a wire that it's very easy for a user to replace. So they don't have to take a screwdriver out or buy a new cheese slicer. It's this kind of clever solution where you can tighten as the wire loosens, and then also replace the wire if it were to happen to break. So the reason I'm just showing this early example is because these steps have always been part of that. But now, many years later, I'm doing much more complex types of projects, and I see that, these steps are still applicable today, especially when you start to kind of broaden the definition of what all of these things kind of mean. So if you think about innovation and business and anything, even not just specifically design related or product design related, these kinds of steps in a process are very applicable to many different things. So finding an opportunity space, where is there a need for a solution, something that's different, digging in and doing the research and seeing really what are the pain points of people that kind of lead to concepting a new type of solution or a new idea. Not prototyping a physical object, but prototyping different ideas, putting them to test and failing quickly and learning. There's always going to be this idea of pitching or selling in the value of something, right? So it's convincing, I like concept A better than concept B, or it's something much more grander than that. And then you have to negotiate and execute on every detail with the different stakeholders involved. So that's kind of a general process, and it can vary, of course, but if you think about those steps as you go about any sort of new project or new initiative, there's things to extract out of each one of those I think that could help make a much better solution. So secondly, I want to talk about empathizing with your customer to bring new value. So what that means is really being relatable to who you're designing or who you're creating a solution for. So this is important that we step back from the design side and really put ourselves in the shoes of a user. And the way we accomplish this most of the time is through research and talking to people. And there's different ways of doing that. So Henry Ford, who was the automobile pioneer, said if you ask people what they wanted, they would say a faster horse, because no one knew what the automobile was. They're not going to tell you that. They're not going to give you the answer if you ask a person, right? But there are pain points associated with riding a horse or getting from point A to point B that an automobile potentially does solve. So what we use research for and talking to people is to develop out these kind of guiding principles that help to drive a solution, not to ask them, tell me what you want, I'll go make it. And there's different types of research that you can use. You don't have to use all of it all the time, but there's things like qualitative or ethnographic study, which means you're talking more one-on-one to somebody and kind of seeing a day in the life, how they behave and really observing them. There's quantitative research, which is more survey-based, where you're sending out, getting information back from the masses. There's secondary research, which is really just competitive studying, so understanding other products like yours that are out there and learning from them. And then expert and stakeholder interviews. So this is, who's the expert in the field or in that domain to really talk to, but who are your stakeholders? Who are the people who are making the decisions at the end of the day? Is it your CEO or whomever? And understanding what's important to them. So you're aware of that going in. I like to do this exercise with a lot of the leadership in any company, but force them to pick. There's success metrics success criteria when you create anything new, but force them to pick what is the one most important thing that we're trying to achieve, even just from a business perspective. So, sometimes making a lot of revenue or making a lot of money from a product is different than doing something that's very different, or going to make a name for yourself in the world, right? Or bring a new experience to the market. So while you want to be successful across a lot of different metrics, forcing and saying what is the one thing, if we can't sacrifice on, what is that thing, and making sure you keep that in mind as you design and sort of select what you're going to move forward with. So in an example, we recently released a video conferencing system for all the office space and from Dolby, where it's for smaller rooms and for collaboration across remote locations. We did a lot of research before we designed anything. So this was a study we did talking to users and also IT managers who purchase this equipment for their offices and understand what's important to them, what do they value. So there's different exercises and different discussions we kind of go through with them to really understand those things. There's also this aspect of kind of participatory or interactive research where you build a lot of prototypes or hypotheses and you put things in front of people and see how they react and respond to it to learn from that. So it's not like a focus group where I'm putting here's 4 different designs or here's 4 different ideas. If 10 out of 12 people like one thing, that's what I'm doing. That's not what this is meant to be. This is more meant to provoke ideas. So for this is a conferencing phone, a phone that sits on a table. It's not meant to say any of these designs is something that we would want to make, but there's certain aspects of them I want to understand how people react to. And then understanding your competition or the different players in the space. So really analyzing and using the different products out there in the market, not only to see how people are reacting to something that's already in the space, and there's learnings that you can take out of that. Even if you're making something, go read the Amazon reviews and you understand what people like and don't like about a certain product. But you also start to see potential area where you can differentiate or where there's white space to kind of play. So a lot of this research, you start to create these high-level guidelines. This is specifically for a conference room. I'm not going to talk to these. This is just an example of, these are very general guidelines that we take out of the research. Again, it's not at this point we're saying this is the feature set, but this is the things that people value and what's important to them. And we use this as a tool to not only come up with new ideas, but evaluate the ideas that we're actually developing along the way. So we always go back to this. So like, for instance, support natural engagement. So this is something like making a conference call more natural, a video conference call more natural. So maybe a bad example is when certain products, when somebody is talking in the room, the camera snaps right to someone's face, and when they stop talking, it snaps away. It's sort of this jarring back and forth experience. I would say that's unnatural. So what is it, so this was kind of an important aspect, and then these other ideas or potential solutions to that. Provide image framing or what have you. So these are sort of guidelines that we take before we even start designing anything. So from there, we think about more like the day in the life. What is the experience that you want somebody to go through, or these experience concepts versus a product concept right away? So think about how somebody's using it, how they're setting it up, and start to kind of visualize these experiences that we want to shoot for in the product. So this is just one example. This is showing this idea of we call it whiteboard framing, where if you're on the whiteboard, the camera knows that and transitions to the whiteboard, so people on the other side can see what you're writing versus they see the whiteboard in the corner. And then we create a lot of these different experiences and classify them, but you can't do everything either. You have to think about what is the must-have and what is these nice-to-haves, and what are the things that are really going to make people happy and delight them that are new. There's, I can come up with so many different ideas, but there's also the reality of engineering and time and cost that goes into this. So we kind of create this to help inform what product requirement would be, but it's all driven through what we want the end experience and really what's relevant and what the end consumer wants. So at the end of the day, this is what I was saying, just released. But a lot of the work I was showing was all the real work we did before doing any of the design work. I skipped the whole section that shows us actually how we design the product and how we do the digital interface. This was just getting to the point of knowing what we should be designing for, and then this is the end result. And there are features on this product now that relate back to a lot of the research. So that idea of natural engagement that I spoke to, rather than the camera snapping to people's faces, the camera can see how many people are in the room and actually, almost like a television camera or a broadcast camera, zooms in, pans to kind of frame the group of people in the room. If someone walks out, it crops into those two people. So if you think about like a news program where the camera's slowly going in and out, it's more reacting in that way. But again, the importance of that feature came out of a lot of this user studies, and it ends up making its way into the final product. And it's newly out in the market, but we're hearing very positive reviews for this. Okay, next. So striving to be simple. So it's sometimes a hard thing to do, even though that's kind of counterintuitive, is to be simple. And this is just an example, which I like. It's Casper mattresses. Maybe many of you are familiar with this, but it's essentially trying to solve the problem of going to a store, a mattress store, and having to go through the process of buying a mattress, which is never really a pleasant process. It's almost like buying a used car or something like that. So a lot of what they focused on here was just trying to solve that problem. And it might look very simple. It's a mattress, but figuring it out how you ship a mattress in a small box, making sure the mattress is of high quality, et cetera, it's fairly complicated. But the value proposition here, or the value that they're bringing to the consumer, is very, very clear in terms of what the benefit is or why someone would buy one of these mattresses. If you're the type of person who doesn't want to go to the mattress store, you're this new type of consumer. So they're very laser focused in what the product goal was, and kept it very simple. It started off very, very successful, and it still is in terms of as a company. So as a designer, you try to make everything as simple as possible, as approachable as possible. Again, though, there's a lot that goes behind it that's very complicated, and it's really easy to think to add in more features and do more things. Typically, engineers think that way, but it's really important to always step back and say, what is that one thing that's really going to make the difference? So, kind of a related example, going back to the cinema, the movie theater that I showed before. So at Dolby, we created this new projection technology and this new audio-based technology for movie theaters. It's a laser projector that the innovation is its extreme range of color to it. So much more color that a director or a color grader has access to create films in, closer to what the human eye can see, where typically when a camera captures a picture and you process it through color grading, you lose a lot of the color that the camera captures. And then on the audio side, this is a kind of a spatial audio system. It's not just like surround sound. This is more of a system where we call it object-oriented sound, where sounds can kind of like move in three-dimensional spaces through the room. So it's pretty clever, innovative technology. But when you go to the movies, you're not thinking about the details of what I was just describing, of why you're going to the movie. There's more of a full experience or a full kind of journey that you go through, and you want that full journey to be enjoyable and memorable. So when thinking about taking those two technologies and creating a new type of movie theater, we have to think about that end-to-end journey for somebody. So the moment they walk into the lobby, they walk through the hallway, they walk into the movie theater, they sit down, they watch the movie, and they leave. So we have to consider these things. Otherwise, the movie isn't about necessarily those two components I described earlier. So from using kind of design and working with technology, we are able to kind of reinvent what the movie theater going experience is like. So this is a new offering from the company. It's similar to like what an IMAX is, where you can choose to pay a little bit more and you go to watch a movie in IMAX. This is a new business model for us where you pay a little bit more and you go watch a movie at a Dolby Cinema. But rethinking what things like the entryway looks like. So when you walk into a big movie hall, we wanted this to look very simple and subtle. So it breaks the noise of the rest of that busy movie hall space, and it looks like there's something special there, almost like a portal that you're walking through. Where'd it go? So and then as you walk through The tunnel, if you, you know, if you remember when you walk into a movie theater, there's always a pathway that goes under the theater that you walk into. There's nothing there. It's like where you throw your garbage away. So taking advantage of that space and making it something that this is all short throw projectors on this curved wall, and it plays content from the movie that we make, whatever movie's showing. So it's really meant to get you excited to watch the film. And then when you're inside, that's where those two technologies really take over when you're watching the movie. But when you look at the space, you don't see anything on the walls. I showed you all those speakers before. The idea was that we didn't want to expose any of the technology. We wanted to make it a very simple design so that when you're watching the movie, you're not distracted by all that technology in space, or that it's not reflecting light back onto the screen. So it looks quiet. It almost looks like there's nothing there. And this was very hard to actually create and install and build. But the idea was to cover everything that's already in the space, right? So this is showing sort of the layout of the speakers there, and there's a lot going on. But the thought is that, you know, this makes the offering of the cinema more approachable, more simple, more easy for a consumer to understand versus, you know, this high tech, using technology as the way to get somebody there. So the point here is, you know, try as hard as you can to focus and keep things simple as you're designing. Don't try to do too much. It's better to do, you know, one thing really well than a lot of things just okay. So quickly prototyping and testing and learning. It's an important part of anything, I think, and, you know, specifically design, to try things quickly, not to sit and overstudy it and spend too much time with it. It's important to bring something into the real world as quickly as you can to see what it's like. And I'm showing here, this is very hardware related, and how a nurse interacts with a handheld device, and, you know, seeing more ergonomic studies and things like that. But really, prototyping can happen at any level. It can happen on a piece of paper, drawing something out and testing it and trying it and learning from it. I think that's important versus trying to overly be analytical about it or too academic about it. So we're lucky to have a prototyping space in my office. So this is our prototyping lab. And this is we're kind of introing it to our CEO in these photos, which is why I have photos of it. But we use the space, you know, all the time. But again, we're lucky to have this. If we didn't, though, we would figure out ways that we could prototype very easily and quickly, even if without having a space. There's also something that we do, and I think probably many of you participate in a version of this, but this is an actually company-sponsored event, which is, we call it Idea Quest. It's kind of like a hackathon, but it's a company-sponsored science fair in some way, where anyone can participate or enter an idea. And if your idea gets selected, you have to actually build this idea up in a short period of time and pitch it to all of the executives at Dolby, and they'll select different winners who, there's different awards and things, but really the thought is that it becomes an investable idea for the company, where we've had a lot of even some of the technology I was showing you in the movie theater came out of this type of an event. So we take it really, it's fun, but we take it really seriously as a way to generate real business opportunity for the company. It's a little hard to see, but when I enter this and my team enters this, we're not, like I said, there's brilliant scientists and engineers. We're not those people in terms of building actual pieces of technology and showing how they work. What we do is show what we aspire to be. So this is an idea for like a Dolby class of air travel. So whether it's business class or you're flying, what would that experience be like for Dolby? And we hacked something together and got it to work. And again, it's not really how it would be done, but it simulates the experience. And if we think that experience is valuable enough, it's worth putting engineering resources to actually build. If we had to actually build an engineering proof of concept to get to the point of proving if the experience was valuable enough. It would have taken months and months and months versus a few days to just do some sort of fake simulation, but give the feeling of what it's like if we were to, fly on a Dolby type of aircraft. And there's a pitching aspect to this where, it's good practice to kind of like sell it in, and people who don't get the opportunity to be in front of an audience and trying to sell their ideas, this is a really good way to kind of give that growth or give that experience. So then I want to talk a little about creating an environment for collaboration, which the space we're in right now is kind of doing that. But the office space in general has been changing, where this was a big trend of individual workspaces being very focused on your task, and then having these moments where you come together for very scheduled meetings and interaction periods, right? So we know that the office design and the way we work is changing quite a bit. And I see it here in all the places I visited today. This is the Frog office in New York, but it's a very open space, and I find this valuable in that, like, ideas and knowledge sharing doesn't happen when you have a scheduled meeting. It kind of organically is happening as you're working and you have a new idea. Hey, let me go share it with you and talk a little bit more about it. And that's where the best ideas kind of happen. So making sure your space and the people you're around really allows for that. So we have this idea of war rooms that we use, which we call them, which are, whenever there's a project, we try to take the team, take them off their desks and put them in a space and have them sitting together. Even though one's an engineer and one's a designer, one's a business strategist, they're all doing their task, but they're all sitting in the same room together. That way these discussions are happening frequently and on a daily basis. So those really big ideas, it's hard to think back and say, it's because I worked on this task, I came up with this amazing idea. It happens in a very organic way, and these are just some ways to stimulate it. So this is a very fancy, I think this is the Airbnb office in San Francisco. It's pretty fancy, but when I was first starting in those design agencies, we would build rooms out of big cardboard panels and set them up and change the size of them and put desks and chairs in them, and it works just the same to serve as a pin-up board, to have a team sitting in there. It doesn't have to be overly built, but this just shows that office infrastructure is getting made now to support this type of working. So in corporate companies, different companies, it's not always easy to have one team dedicated to one thing. In an agency, it's a little bit different. So this is our office in Dolby, just showing some different pictures of our this is the area my group works in, but we tried to make it as open and simulate this as much as possible. So we don't have the luxury to have everyone go in a room and work, but setting up these spaces, we can kind of have moments of that versus, every day that's where the team sits. This is just one of the pictures of the audio labs. There's 100 of these types of labs in the building. But what we also use these rooms for, and this type of space for, is bringing others into it. So meaning like people who aren't necessarily that in startup mode or the creative group, but those who are more focused on business, or this is the executive of that communication, that conferencing business group, and one of the guys from my team, and they're working together sort of in this kind of collaborative space. So it helps kind of break down the barrier for levels, and gets these guys who work in this world every day sort of out of that space and into a different space, and almost allows other people to step back and think differently about their business. And then in the office too, I mean, as I mentioned, Dolby is a very high-tech company, but everything we do is really to service the art of sight and sound, right? So all this great technology, it's really for us watching a movie and getting emotional reaction, for the director to get his vision out there in the world, and technology is enabling this. So we want to make sure in the space that the engineers and the teams all remember that. So everywhere through the space, and this is our lobby, we have this really impressive kind of screen in there that we actually have artists come in and create art exhibits based on, there's a huge audio system. All those lights are actually speakers, and then you have this very different sort of window or ribbon of a LCD screen, and artists will come in every quarter and create an exhibit for the space. And again, this is a pretty sophisticated system, but just reminding us what we're there for, what we're doing on a daily basis through showing art in the space. I think it's an important thing to think about as you develop your companies and businesses, and reminding yourself the reason you're creating it and inspiring yourself by it. We're also lucky to have we had artists come in and build these exhibits through the space, again, to inspire the employees of why they're here. So thinking about the past, and this is the first noise canceling circuit that started the whole entire company, and then there's some things that are more abstract and visual and audio based, which just again remind you why you're coming in. And I think doing this, it doesn't have to be so advanced, but just for everyone to just think about what are some of the ways you can do this yourselves, or for the company to bring that inspiration into your work. Then there's also the quotes that we have from our founder. This one's interesting. It's about sort of the anxiety of being an inventor, and how you have to be anxious to be an inventor and not know what the solution is, not knowing if there's going to be an answer. And then last, I wanted to talk about why it's an advantage to be new and small. Dolby is not a new and small company. My team may be, but one example, this is, my friend was just giving us a lecture recently, so it was in my mind, but he developed a motorcycle startup in San Francisco called Alta Motors. It's I think it is the first electric motorcycle company. There's electric scooters and electric bicycles that have existed for a while, but a true performance motorcycle being electric is a fairly big feat to overcome. But he did, and he's a startup. It's going through the first round of funding, and he was able to develop a performance bike that satisfied the needs of his audience, and his audience is typically style of people who are maybe skeptical about using electric vehicles for a very kind of like macho industry, but he was able to win them over. But he told a story about his company, but also when he's like a Harley Davidson, who's a huge company, massive company all over the world. They tried to do something like this in terms of building an electric motorcycle, and they couldn't. It was just too massive of an infrastructure, too much politics at hand for them to go in and do something very new like this, where a small company, this guy, he was a designer, very interested in motorcycle, was able to make this happen. So now Harley Davidson has actually asked them to partner with them to develop the next a Harley Davidson version of an electric motorcycle. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So again, my group, we're small. We're about a 12-person team, and we sit in a centralized position in the company, where meaning we're not a part of the audio conferencing business group, or the consumer product business group, or the cinema business group. We keep ourselves separate, so we're able to work as that small team in a large company, but with all of those established business groups. So startups, it's kind of ironic. You're small and you're able to move quick and do a lot, but your goal is to grow. And I think it's just something to think about. As you grow and you're adding more people and doing more things, how do you maintain that idea of a startup, even if you're a large company? So, if I think about the Bay Area and sort of what the history of the Bay Area and what it's like now, I mean, this still is the center of the world for innovation and technology and design. I think so. It's why I'm still there. I think part of that is because it's always been a place where people can think really freely. They're very open to new ideas and trying different things. You know, there's downsides to that, of course, but from a you know, allowing for new thinking and new ideas and innovation, it's for sure what you need in an environment. So you know, thinking about being new and small, I look at what I've seen today and what I'm going to see all week, and what I'm hearing about Armenia, and I really see it as an advantage for the country in many ways versus a large established place that really has a set way of working already. And the more you get set in your ways, it's harder to change that. So even, you know, San Francisco, the way things work, it's kind of becoming that a little bit. It's very open to new ideas, but there's a way that things are working, right? Where I look at the opportunity here to define your own path in many ways. So it's really exciting to me to see that, and that, you know, these steps that I went through first. This again, you can think about how would you know, these statements or these guidelines can be applied to many different things, not just the way you design a product, but how you think about, you know, society, how you think about what's kind of the next big thing, how you disrupt the current way of thinking and come up with something very new. So it's really exciting and inspiring to be here and get a sense of that. Going around today and having discussions and saying this, you know, everyone's talking about what they're talking about is really making change and advancing technology and the way you think about innovation. And I see that it's not just talk. You know, it's putting these things into action. So that was really again inspiring to me. So hopefully there were one or two takeaways here in terms of some of the things that I find important in my process and how that can be used maybe in many of the things that you do. But also, again, this is helpful for me to take back home, and the next time I come, I'll have that layer of information in my head to know what everyone's doing here, and hopefully the next presentation can be more curated to what is really going to be beneficial for you. All right, thank you. And if I can, you know, if there's any questions, I can take questions too.
Thank you. I'm Sona, and probably I have 2 or 3 questions. First question is about user wants versus user needs. Sometimes we say, I mean, how you deeply understand what is user needs when they always say, I want this, I want that, but it's not about what they want, right?
Yeah, that's right. So that first kind of pillar in that diagram is, you know, ethnographic studies, right? So that's why just sending a survey and saying, you know, what do you want, what's preferable to you, it's sometimes inaccurate to just look at that data and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But kind of seeing you have to almost be a psychologist in some way to see how people observe them as they're talking, ask them follow-up questions, and, you know, reframe the question. Sometimes people want to give you the answer that they think you're looking for, so you have to ask the question multiple times in different ways. So it's a little bit of, you know, you have to be like a psychologist in some way to see what they're doing and how they're reacting to things versus just asking them. So that's why you don't always have the luxury to the time to do all that research, but to have those different pieces, you're able to look at it all together and start to kind of see patterns and things. And I think that's one of the ways to get around needs versus wants. Just do more of it. I mean, research is not there's techniques to it like that, but I mean, like in my agency days, we would sell big projects to big companies, and they would pay us a lot of money, and we would do big research studies. They were great, but now, you know, it's an internal team, and we don't do those big studies all the time. So it's now kind of like scrappy or efficient about how we do research. We have an internal data, like an internal test group these sort of user test groups. I mean, even that helps for you to think through, get inspired by new thought versus doing some heavy, research programming. So we use it pretty rapidly. We're just talking through something. Go take it around the office today. Don't listen to them like a survey and say, we have 4 people, but just hear their reaction. That might be yeah, so success in terms of like, there's success in the market, and the market tells you that. You don't know until it's out there, and you want it or you don't. But leading up to it, the way we measure success, and it's important to take, part of it is taking personal judgment out of that. So you might like something that you don't, but you're maybe neither of you are the end person for the product, right? So you want to capture, or your end target, maybe whoever you're doing something for, what are those kind of success criteria? And like things like those guidelines, or this is what this person values. Setting that up even before creating the guidelines, so understanding who you're doing it for, finding that person, and then when you come up with a new idea or have a design, you remind yourself, this is what this person wants. Because I can say, of course, personality always comes into like trying to step back a little bit and have these more philosophical ways of judging something that aren't really, based on what someone likes or they don't really compete. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good question. I think it's related in terms of trying to take personal judgment out of it. Like before we're designing anything, like what are those success metrics? Both the business success metrics and then our design experience success metrics or guidelines. That's always the best way, because knowing if you all agree to that going before you start designing or creating something, if you agree designing for this person and be very focused about that person, even though it might be a broader target, then you're not thinking about what you think is right or what the other person thinks is right. It's what is that, whoever that person is, what do they think is right? And even finding, I was talking about research, like finding people who represent that audience, I think is the key. Finding and not only aiming to find that exact right person, but have that person weigh in on it as a, outside of the team, something that they want or they have a but at the end of the day, too, you need to there needs to be like a leader in the group as well that you want to get everyone's input. This is what my team loves. I always listen to every comment, everything they have to say, take it seriously, even if I don't agree with it, or there might be something important to listen to. But at the end of the day, someone has to have a vision as well, and sometimes it's hard decisions to make where you can't just go back to the metrics, the guidelines, or the tools, and you have to make the call what to do. So it might be establishing also some of these kind of the visionary or the lead at the end of the day that's going to be held accountable for that decision. If it's too consensus based, like everyone has to weigh in, you're not going to get anywhere also. So I think it's just balancing those two things. nice, so it's almost an advantage in a way for a designer to work in that way versus, how do we make this, these parts as efficiently as possible kind of thing. So it varies. Two parts of my career, one on the agency side, it's a little bit more challenging to iterate because you're working on a fixed schedule, fixed time, fixed budget. You can't, you have to be very conscientious about where you're using your time. So there's some limitations you have to think about there. In moving in-house, there's still schedule and things like that, but I'm able to convince if we want to iterate more, saying we're not quite there yet, we want to try something new, I can justify delaying a project or taking more time to do that and getting to the right solution. So I don't know, I think it depends. There's no rule to it. I'd say in the agency world, maybe we take, I want to say 4 weeks to really explore different ideas and try different things, focus it down, maybe take another 4 weeks to take one of those and mess with the details, play with the details. So kind of like 1 month chunks of time. Maybe a project is like 4 months long. That's just in the design phase. Then there's manufacturing, and that'll take long. Product development is maybe 1 year is a good. The stuff I was showing you took like 3 years, 2 years. So it's not so. Maybe those aren't great examples either of iterating too much, because at some point it's called like diminishing return, where you're making it better, but you're only making it for how much time you're taking. You're making it 1% better. Is someone going to care? So it's. At least I always want to make things perfect, but sometimes you have to say it's good enough. Get it out there. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when it comes to iterating as well. That's why then bringing people back in, research. It's a good check to yourself to say, this is where we were. This is sort of what people are usually like. I don't see any difference. What? Okay. Let's just go with what we had. Let's not continue to going and going and going. Okay. Yeah.
So the study on the video conferencing, where you came up with the 5 values,
Yeah.
major values, and you kind of skip the part of how you came to the values, like the process. Would you just elaborate?
Yeah. So it is fairly organic. It's like an analytical process. This is where you see picture, where you use a lot of sticky notes and things like that, and you find kind of patterns in what you see in research. Right? These are the things you keep hearing. There's something in here. You start clustering these. Yeah. It's so this level of synthesis coming out of research. You collect all this input, all this data, and then rather than saying it should be a camera that does this, that's too big of a step to take. To say people are saying that this is really important to them over and over, in some form. Then let's cluster that together. They're also saying this. These are kind of the main things we're finding out of the research that are important to people. And now let's start coming up with ideas that service those important areas. So it's that organic. It's going into that room that I was showing, or those rooms, sitting with your team for a few days, and going through that kind of process. What was summarizing the data, writing it all out on the wall. Kind of stepping back and seeing the patterns. So I think one of them was, I don't know, there's many, I suppose, but one that I really enjoyed was one for, the picture you saw with the nurse. There was a nurse holding those different models. That was a product for hospitals, for nurses. Just because it was doing, the background of that product was actually doing something, using technology and design to, do something beneficial to human health. And so for nurses, the idea was, or there's many preventable error in hospitals that lead to death. That come from like giving the wrong medication or not doing something in time or not. So this was a device that nurses would carry around with them that sort of helped them to kind of go through like a checklist, like a pilot goes through a checklist when they're about to take off. No matter how good they are, they have to check these 5 things, and it's a routine. So that device was for a startup, and to develop a device that nurses kind of have that in the palm of their hand as a scanner, and they scan the patient's wristband, they scan the medicine, they scan, their badge, and it kind of goes through the steps. There's other functionalities to that. But that one was interesting because we did, this was in the agency days, which I said is very hard to, you have to work pretty quickly and efficiently, but we were able to do all of the design, the electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, firmware, manufacturing. So end to end, they just came in and said, we need to make this work in 6 months or the company's going under. They were well funded, so they were able to pay high rates of those San Francisco companies, but we were able to make that happen for them. A lot of, for medical-based product, a lot of things you have to worry about like water, ingress, and dropping. So, there's many products I've worked on, but that one always stands in my mind because we did it, kind of like saved the company in many ways, but it was also a good story to it. Like we were using your ability to, for good in some way versus it's just another electronic that you use and throw away after a year. Yeah, of course.